Okay, welcome to the first of two videos on the jury system, and of course the jurors are the second group of lay people involved in the criminal courts. The first we've already looked at, which are magistrates. And let's just remind ourselves, lay people are those individuals who, in normal circumstances, are neither qualified nor paid for the work that they do. Everything that governs juries is contained within the Juries Act 1974. So that means effectively that's a piece of statute that says everything that juries are required to do and all of the rules and regulations surrounding juries. And there are around about 500,000 or 500,000 jurors called to jury service each year. And they are asked or told to suspect to be engaged for anywhere up to 2 weeks service. Now that can mean that they're there in court for a day and a half, and it can mean they're there for about 6-7 months, depending on the length of trial. And we'll cover that when we look at the role and processes of jury service later. It's seen to be a civic duty. And by a civic duty, we mean that it's something that's central to making society function better. And because of that, because it's central to making the judiciary work, of course, jurors can be prosecuted for failing to turn up at court or to behaving in a way that contravenes what the court would expect a juror, or the way in which a court would expect a juror to behave. In general, there are 12 people that sit on a jury, and the judge would require a unanimous verdict of 12-0. Bearing in mind that fits in beyond all reasonable doubt, with our standard of proof being beyond all reasonable doubt. However, in certain circumstances, they will accept an 11-1, and in extreme circumstances, a 10-2 verdict, and these are known as majority verdicts. And we'll talk more about that when we look at the roles and processes in the later video. So what we're going to look here is we're going to talk about specifically the qualification and selection of jurors. We're then going to talk about what disqualifies them or how they can get off jury service, and the reasons why that might be the case. So in the first instance, we are going to look what qualifies a juror. And it's very simple, 3 rules. The first is that a juror has to be between 18 and 70 years old. And that's 18 and 70 years old on the day of the jury service, or the day that the jury service starts. The second is that they have to be a member of the electoral roll. And I know that you're now asking what the electoral roll is, and the electoral roll is a list of people who are registered to vote in elections in the United Kingdom. And the third is that they have to be resident in the UK for 5 years since they were 13. Okay? So the 3 things that qualify somebody for jury service is that they are between 18 and 70 years old on the day that the court case or the jury service starts, that they are a member of the electoral roll, and that they have been resident in the United Kingdom for 5 years since the age of 13. And people that fit that criteria go or are in a large computer database, and the computer will randomly generate names of people who the court system requires for jury service, and that is contained and dealt with by the Jury Central Summoning Bureau. I always get this word spelt wrong. So the Jury Central Summoning Bureau is the body that controls the selection of jurors for court. So that's qualification and selection. Relatively straightforward, relatively easy. But let's have a look at those things that might disqualify somebody, the things that might stop somebody from going and serving on a jury. And that's relatively straightforward. There are 2 key areas. The first are going to be those that have something or are involved in crime themselves, and we'll discuss those more in a moment. And the second are those that have some form of mental disorder, and we'll discuss that later. So, in terms of crime, there are 3 main areas. The first is bail. The second is those that have been convicted. And the third in this area are those individuals who, let's say within the 10-year rule. And I'll explain exactly what that means in a moment. So, bail, in short, means if a person is summoned, or a person summoned for jury service is on bail for a criminal offence, then they will not be eligible to be called forward for jury service. In terms of convicted felons, if a person summons has ever been sentenced to imprisonment for life, so that'll be for one of the major crimes, imprisonment for a public protection. Oh, spelled that wrong. Imprisonment for public protection offences, or have been imprisoned for 5 years or more, that will disqualify them. There is also certain extended sentences in Scotland that would count too. But in short, imprisonment for life, public protection, or has been sentenced for 5 years or more will disqualify them from jury service. Or alternatively, if within the last 10 years they have served any part of a sentence, within 10 years, that will disqualify them. So too, if they've had a suspended sentence within the last 10 years. And thirdly, some community orders. Okay, so those things will disqualify people too. So, in terms of criminals, those that are on bail, those that have been convicted of certain offences throughout their life, and those that within the last 10 years have had those 3 major offences or are have served any part or suspended or have some community orders. The second major group of people are those that have some mental disorder, and that would be those that suffer from and is resident in a hospital as a result. So if somebody suffers from a mental disorder and is resident in hospital as a result of that, then they are barred from jury service. Similarly, regular visits for the mental disorder will also bar them. If they are seeing a doctor regularly for their mental condition, then that will bar them as well. And thirdly, has a guardian under the Mental Health Act. That will also bar them, the Mental Health Act. Okay, so those 3 things. And there is one very final group that I do just want to discuss with you, and that's that the court can decide themselves. So the court can decide themselves. If somebody tips up to court and they have a particularly, or they have an illness or a disability that might stop them from doing their duty properly, then the court might say that on this occasion we can't use you. And so, for instance, that may very well be somebody who is profoundly deaf, might not be able to hear evidence, and it might not be deemed to be fair. So the court might decide themselves that they wish to remove somebody from jury service in that sense. So there you've got the sort of 3 main groups of people who are disqualified. There are 2 other groups though, and these are not to be confused. Please don't confuse disqualification with deferral and excusal. They are 3 completely different types or groups of people. Now, deferral means put off. Okay, it means you put off jury service for some time within 12 months. And what that means is that if you defer your jury service, and we'll talk about the reasons why that might be the case in a moment, if you defer your jury service, then effectively at some stage within the next 12 months, you will be expected to come back to court to carry out your jury service. And the date at which you are likely to have to come back is set at the time that you defer your jury service. So you know all that's happened is that you have put off for a period somewhere within the next 12 months before you have to come back. And the sort of examples where that might be the case would be if you have a pre-booked holiday. So it seems perfectly sensible that if you've had a holiday booked and then you get your letter to attend court, that you would be able to say, it's cost me a lot of money, so therefore I'm not going to go. Similarly, if you've had an operation in hospital and you've been waiting for some time to have your operation, it seems only sensible and fair that you're allowed to go and have that done. And then thirdly, and this might be very pertinent to you guys, it's if you have examinations. The court is not going to ask you to turn up in court if you've got an important examination to take over that period. Most of these deferrals are accepted. Okay, so it's very rare that somebody will not be accepted for a deferral. And any appeals that, where it's not the case that they are accepted, any appeals will be headed or be asked for the head of the summoning bureau, who will judge on all appeals as to whether or not he will overturn or she will overturn the decision. So let's look at the final way, and that's excusal. And excusal means get off jury service altogether. All right, so this means not put off, not come back at some stage. This means you do not have to do jury service this time round. Your name goes back into the computer and you may never get reselected on this premise. And there are some groups of people to whom this applies. The first, as we can see here, are members of the armed forces. So members of the armed forces, but predominantly those that are going on operations. I have no idea what that loud click was. So those members that are going on operations. So if they're just about to deploy to Afghanistan, or that they're just about to deploy to Iraq, then they would be excused jury service altogether, and their name would go back into the hat, and they would wait to be called when their name was regenerated. The second group of people are those that are 65 plus. Now I know that up here we said you have to be 18 to 70 years old. But of course, if you were elderly and infirm and you felt that getting to court was difficult, you could apply to have your jury service excused on that premise. The third group of people are, if your religious beliefs, a group of people whose religious beliefs prevent them from working or sitting on a jury. I have no idea what religions those are or what they might be. But if somebody was able to present to the court that their religious beliefs meant that they could not sit on a jury, then they would be excused. Some jobs in the medical profession are also excused. Now, again, don't ask me what on earth those jobs are, but some jobs would be excused in terms of sitting on the jury. The fifth group of people that we have are MPs and Euro MPs. And the astute amongst you will already be starting to think about the reason for that is that MPs and Euro MPs make up part of the legislative or the executive, and of course this is predominantly a judiciary function. So MPs and Euro MPs will be asked not to sit, because that would be a breach of the separation of powers that we've already discussed in previous videos. If, and this is a final one, if you have served on a jury twice in 2 years, then you would also be excused. You'd have done your duty effectively. So if the computer unfortunately randomly generated your name for a third time in 2 years, you could request to be excused for that third time, and that would normally happen. And the only group of people that do have to attend, but who might have some problem, of course, would be barristers and solicitors. And there are special guidelines for barristers and solicitors to help them to understand what they need to do, because they have specialist legal knowledge. And of course, the point about a jury is it's a jury of our peers. So there we go. Very, very quickly, we have covered qualification, disqualification, deferral, and excusal. And remember that qualification says what it is that we are, or how we become eligible for jury service. Disqualification are those things that would stop us, prevent anybody from being on the jury. Then we have deferral and excusal, which are sort of ways of getting off jury service, but not permanently. And there you have it. That's the end of our short video on jury service.